Okay, ladies and gentlemen, another episode from the Kettlebells podcast. I have with me Glen Weinstein. Is that right?
That's perfect. Look, I mean, you deserve a medal just for doing that right. Well done.
In German it would be Weinstein.
Weinstein, I know.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. From the Kettlebell6ix, right?
right.
Personal trainer from the UK, right?
Yes, sir.
Low back specialist. We're really
Yes,
interested
sir.
in this, and an avid kettlebell practitioner, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Glen.
Thank you for having me, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. You know how we always do it. Just give us the rundown. How did you get started with kettlebells? How did you get started as a personal trainer? Give us the whole backstory.
Wow, okay. I'll try and make this the quick version because I'd hate for it to take as long as it did in real time.
Take as long as you want to.
You know what started me off on this whole journey was coming from a fit family. Both my parents are movers, whether it was my mum growing up playing tennis and being part of even walking a marathon, or my dad always being an advocate of triathlons and marathons, and he was a student of judo as a child and a teenager in South Africa, and movement was just part of our family culture. It just was normal. It wasn't like it's something that had to be emphasized or overly encouraged. It was just as normal as brushing your teeth twice a day. It's what you do. So movement was just always a part of my life, and as a result, so was sport, because I was in a school that encouraged sport in all of its forms, whether it was swimming or hockey or athletics or football or rugby, whatever. You were encouraged to sort of try everything. And I think that speaks to kind of who I am now. I'm an advocate for trying everything. A while ago, I used to say to all my clients, do everything so you can do anything.
That's a great catchphrase, man.
Yeah, so that was really one of those things that you don't necessarily need to drill down deep into every niche and become a master at it, but try everything. Chances are, if you try it for long enough, you'll understand your body and how it moves and how it needs to be pushed and trained and listened to and all the rest of it. And eventually, once you've tried everything, you can do anything. But really what started me off as a personal trainer was injury. I always was in gyms. Being in a gym was just normal, whether I was a student at university or, in full-time employment. It was just, I'd get up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, get to the gym, have a workout, and then go to the office. And I was surrounded by a lot of bros in the gym.
Yeah, it's normal. Right? Gym culture. Yeah.
I was deeply involved in that space, just because that was what a gym was.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Right. In the early noughties, you didn't have many options for selecting your gym. A gym just was a gym, and it included all the roided out bros, as well as all of the people with ankle warmers on doing classes. So
exactly,
it was sort of everyone.
That's gym culture.
Yeah. And I don't know how I fitted in there, other than to say that I knew that I enjoyed training. I enjoyed being there. As a kid, I always sort of idolized the image of the bodybuilder. It was sort of a peak of physical conditioning, and idolized performers, whether it was in sport or athletics, and saw that as an incredible feat of functional strength and functional movement and fitness. But I wasn't quite sure what I was doing in the gym. I was just learning and trying everything, whether it was the big three from powerlifting or those weird looking kettlebells in the corner, because in the early noughties in England, they only had horrible looking kettlebells in the corner of the gym that was sort of left to get dusty and not really used by anyone. But I sort of tried everything. And then one day, one of the bros said to me, you can bench whatever it was. Let's put that on the bar. And he gave me such a bad spot on the bar that it tore my shoulder, terribly tore my shoulder.
Oh, shit.
And I was told that I needed surgery, or I'd never be able to swim front crawl again, because my shoulder would dislocate and all the rest of it.
What was your age when that happened?
I was in my mid-20s. I was probably 25, 26, 24, maybe somewhere around there. And instead of taking the surgery, what I actually decided to do was research the athletes who had the most expensive shoulders.
Oh.
So throwers. became
baseballs or baseball.
Exactly.
All right.
So I looked to the States because they are still some of the leaders in how heavily they invest in sport and how much they spend on athlete development. So I looked at baseball and I looked at swimming and I looked at all of those sorts of well-established sports and looked at the rehabilitation protocols that they had in place for people who sustained similar injuries to what I had. And what I ended up going down was a route that took me towards Kettlebells, very, very light Kettlebells, and those sorts of patterns of movement.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for the rotator cuff, man. It
was perfect, right?
It's what it is. So perfect for
exactly. Yeah. And at the time, I didn't even know where to find something like that. So I used to take half kilogram ankle weights and put them on my wrist. Mm-hmm. And just take myself through a similar pattern of movement of those club casts and that sort of thing with quarter of a kilogram, half a kilogram, building up to 2.5 kilograms over many, many months, and very slowly rebuilt my shoulder.
Fascinating.
Never had the surgery. And that was basically the start of me saying, you know what, I have more than just a peripheral interest in this. I feel like the passion, the fires of my passion are being stoked way more than by this hobby I have than by anything I'm doing in my actual profession. So I did my qualifications and then took some time off to really sort of hone the skill and learn the craft a bit better, and left everything I was doing in sort of, in inverted commas, proper jobs. I keep saying I don't have a proper job. I get to do what I love for a living, so it doesn't really feel like I have a proper job. But I left that world of you know, putting on my suit and tie and going to the office every morning, and became a personal trainer. And I've never looked back, and I've never been happier. And that was probably 12 years ago. Wow.
So you've been a personal trainer now for over 12 years.
Yeah, about 12 years. Yeah.
Wow. And the Kettlebells, or that injury that led to Kettlebells, that was your entry to kettlebells then?
Yeah, that was like unconventional training. My sort of it opened my mind and opened the door to understanding that the planes of motion that I was moving in weren't necessarily making me robust to injury in a functional sense.
Isn't it fascinating that we consider a kettlebell or a Kettlebell where we stand and move through time and space on our own with our body, with a weight attached to it, unconventional? And what we call conventional is machine stuff. Where you
in straight lines,
all right, you're pulling or pushing whatever in straight lines, not getting. And I think functional has become such a bastardized term that I always use practical. I love the word practical. It's just leads away from that functional where you see folks doing heavy barbell squats on BOSU balls and stuff.
God. Oh my God, that's
so that's the practical sense, and I think it always leads back to this idea or this thinking that I have, that the fitness industry, or at least back in the 80s when Nautilus came up with Arthur Jones and everything, that we are telling people to train like bodybuilders on machines that kind of isolate movement, and say that this is fitness, instead of teaching people, hey, you know what, when you show up to the gym, the best thing that we can do is just have a session standing, because you probably sit all day, right? So let's just do this 45 minutes standing. Let's just do some deadlifts, some farmer's walk, some overhead stuff.
It's one of the biggest things that, like, as I see one of my clients going towards a bench during a rest period, I'm like, no, don't. Don't sit down. You don't need to sit down. That's your default position for the following 8 hours after I leave you.
And you're crazy. I still love it. I still love the bench press. I still think machines are cool. But in most cases, I think it's upside down. Unconventional is moving your body through time and space without any aid, and conventional is machine based.
You're so right. It's absolutely, and I'm 100% with you there. That, like, as much as I'm an advocate of, should we call it conventional training with kettlebells?
Yeah, let's start the movement.
Right, yeah, exactly. Let's get the t-shirts printed quickly. So
exactly.
As much as I am an advocate for that, and in fact, I don't have a gym membership. I only train from my house with kettlebells, maces, clubs, and a chin-up bar. That's pretty much what I use. I still think more is better. Like, it's great to have mastery of this kind of equipment, because ultimately what you're talking about having mastery of is just the way that you move under load.
Exactly.
Through all three planes of motion. But it is fun to do a heavy deadlift from time to time.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I would even go as far to say that, if you deadlift and press, you are probably 99% fine. That's cool. But most people sit on machines. Mm-hmm. And this is where I have kind of an issue with. If you're sitting all day at a desk, and then you walk inside a gym, and now you sit again for the next 45 minutes, and you even probably sit even more because every time you have a rest, you check your phone, then I think something's off a little bit. Right?
Absolutely.
And funny thing is, when we started training intensively with kettlebells, and our clients experience this as well, you get delayed onset muscle soreness on your feet.
Yeah.
Right? Because you stand all the time. You do snatches and clean and press and whatever have you for 30 minutes, and your feet get cramps, right? Because, hey, I'm not used to moving, like you said, under load, standing all the time. Mm-hmm. But where I come from, and that's why I love maces, I think that's why when you gravitate to kettlebells, you gravitate towards a mace, which is a different tool of the same family, right?
Right.
Because I consider it has such a natural and primitive vibe to it. If you want to be
mechanics, throwing mechanics, right?
Exactly. Your body has to work in harmony with all the muscle fibers, upper body, lower body. Everything has to be synchronized. Your brain has to understand exactly what to do with the left side, what to do with the right side. There's not even no stabilizing. It's funny when you do. When they think, well, let's do some exercises for your stabilizers in the gym. When I'm like, hey, you know what? Do a clean, do a snatch, do a press, and you'll feel.
Try a bottoms up carry,
or a bottom up carry.
Tough drill again, right?
Exactly. That's what it is, right? Yeah, it's fascinating.
Absolutely, yeah. By the way, can I just put a pin in our conversation for a moment just to say congratulations for developing your own line of kettlebells. They look beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much, man.
They look really cool. Thank you. Having seen the bells that you train with in your gym on your posts, they look like really nicely balanced kettlebells, good quality kettlebells, and it looks like you've managed to create that with your own brand. So well done. It couldn't have been easy.
Thank you so much. I was actually lucky. I got an email one day from a Chinese supplier. And they said, hey, we do rubber plates, we do all kinds of stuff. And then I asked them, hey, you know what? I need hollow core competition kettlebells. So she sent me an image, and I was like, ooh, they look like straight from Kettlebell Kings. And that's exactly the ones that we're looking for. Beautiful. And then, I risked it. I said, okay, you know what? I'll order a couple. I paid, and funny thing is, man, I paid more for the shipping than for the kettlebells.
No, of course, yeah. That's always the nightmare. Do you know what? I just had a major win the other day. I just went and picked up a 92 kilo kettlebell from a gym. It's a big boy, but it was from a gym. Funnily enough, it's in South London, and one of my followers on Instagram messaged me, and he said, "Look, I found this post on Facebook. They're selling this kettlebell, and I was gonna buy the Rogue 80." But the shipping was going to cost me more than the kettlebell, and the whole thing was going to cost like £600 or something.
Oh my god! Yeah, that's
right.
heavy.
It's insane.
That's heavy.
It's insane.
Yeah,
For a kettlebell,
it's insane.
Probably you're only going to swing. That's it.
Yeah, almost definitely.
Right.
And, funny thing is with even now that we have, I've put out a list. I said, hey, everybody who wants to buy kettlebells from us, here's a list. Sign up. Yeah. And we got over 100 people on that list.
Hey, congratulations, man.
And, it's awesome. It's people are asking now, hey, what will the shipping be like? And I'm like, it's going to be exorbitantly pricey. It's going to be
cheap way to
ship a cannonball to you from Switzerland to the United States, for example.
Yeah.
So
with customs and.
Yeah, it's crazy. But, it's a new challenge. And I was like, you know what? Let's let's do it. Let's accept the challenge.
So let's keep going. I want to get geeky for a second here.
Yeah.
Why did you go for hollow core, and have you tried juggling your hollow core kettlebells, and do they move nicely for juggling as well? Because I've found that hollow core tends to have strange revolutions through some of the juggling motions that they don't have when I have like fully packed kettlebells. That I can juggle with really smoothly. And if let's say I go for a triple overflip or a triple reverse flip, whatever you call it, through that many revolutions, the handle still comes around neatly. Whereas with my hollow cores, if I go for more than one revolution, you start getting...
That might be the case, yeah. You know, I did not start juggling, and I won't planning on juggling these the hollow cores, because I don't want to damage them too much.
Okay.
Because when they drop, they drop. Even though we have good flooring, I have 112 kg that is totally rusty, totally destroyed inside. It clangs and bangs, but that's the one I'm using for juggling.
Nice.
But I think where you're coming from, it might be that the feeling might be different. But what I can tell you is that after swinging, thousands of times with our regular kettlebells, the hollow cores feel way better for swinging motions, cleaning, snatching, doubles. Doubles feel way more in tuned. You don't have to battle the kettlebell as much. It's well, of course, it also depends on your form. But if you have mastered form with these normal kettlebells, you will feel even more at home with hollow cores. And the reason why I chose hollow cores is because I saw all the professionals work with hollow cores. One of the clients back in the day, that was like 1.5 years ago at least, showed me a hollow core. I trained with it a little bit. I was like, ooh, they feel way different.
Very different, yeah. Very different.
And I got to show you this. Wait, I'm gonna grab one and I can show you
please.
This.
Come on. This is now my podcast, everyone. I'm in charge, and we're going to talk about nothing but me. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, patience is a virtue.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes just be patient.
The Kettlebell6ix podcast, since you left, it's now mine.
we switch things.
Yeah,
so now,
exactly.
Watch this. So this is the normal kettlebell, right?
Yeah,
the one that I've been using.
Yeah.
So you see the window is quite wide.
Yeah.
Right. And now keep this picture in mind now. With the hollow cores.
Yeah, much narrower window, huh?
It's a little bit narrow.
Yeah.
So initially, when I started cleaning them and started working with them, I was like, hey, you know what? It feels a little bit strange. It's the windows more narrower, right?
Yeah, so hand insertion has to be more precise.
Hand insertion has to be more precise. So I started banging my forearms a little bit, and I was like, oh, I got to get used to them. But once you get used to them, the feeling's way better. Most definitely.
Have you played around with any? Have you played around with any with a beveled edge?
These one to make it a little bit easier on the forearms.
Yeah, I got sent one the other day, and I've been playing around with that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard about them, and I've seen them in action. I think some athletes, Dennis Vasiliev, used them as well.
Yeah.
But I do understand it from a certain perspective, but on the other hand, what I'm thinking is, if you start training with kettlebells, many people have problems in the forearm. It hurts, and the clean, the snatch, everything hurts. So then I always tell people, get used to it. Let your body get used to it. Do not use wristbands, because this will take the brunt of the weight instead of you getting used to it.
Same thing. I think wristbands are going to encourage bad form for longer. Whereas you'll learn good form quickly if you're avoiding it.
Exactly. The only reason where I see application of a wristband is if you really have had an intense clean or snatch session one day, and the next day you want to go at it again, or you have to go at it again, whatever might be the situation, and then you want to put on a wristband because you still feel the pain. I do get it to a certain extent.
I've done sessions where I do like 300+ snatches with the 16, and the following day there's absolutely nothing on the back of my. It's technique, man. Like, honestly,
you got to get used to it. Yeah, you got
to get used to it. And I've actually found that it is a soft landing on the beveled edge, but if you miss that beveled edge by even a centimeter, half a centimeter, now you're on an edge.
Yeah, I get it. I
So
get it.
like,
Even worse.
yeah,
Sounds like it's even worse. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Had the same discussion I had, or at least the same discussion or debate was about these gorilla kettlebells
Hmm.
with the faces, those protruder faces. And
Yeah,
even though these bells look awesome, I don't think it feels very,
they're not
very.
they're not for training with.
No, I don't think. Yeah, or at least if you're not hit the face on your forearm, but
I haven't
I don't
found
know,
one
man.
that is. I haven't found a single. I've played with skull bells. I've played with the Onnit bells. I've played with some other ones which I won't name the company because they whatever. They're very nice. They're beautiful kettlebells.
Okay.
But even with the swing, there isn't a single application where I'm using a molded kettlebell that I feel like I'm as happy using the molded as I would using a conventional or competition kettlebell. It's always worse. The length, because it's molded, it's a longer shape, it's a longer bell, so the weight is further from you. When you're doing things in a rack position, it's not comfortable. It's just, they're very nice, and I've bought them for gifts for people, but it's a doorstop.
That if the equipment doesn't match, but at the same time, I do feel where people come from. Sometimes people be like, listen, I have this decathlon kettlebell, and I know it's not a competition, but I'm happy with it. I get to do the motions and everything. And I'm like, hey, that's awesome. And if you don't have the budget to buy a more expensive kettlebell, like a hollow car, that's totally fine, man. But once you get used to the premium, you just don't want to switch again.
Like, I'm sure you get these questions a lot on your socials as well. A lot of people get in touch and say, like, what weights should I start with? And maybe it's worth us actually just addressing that. But also, what weight should I start with, and what kettlebell should I start with? And I would love to be able to tell people, just go out and buy an affordable kettlebell. But actually, what I truly believe is, like, save and spend once. Don't do what I did. And what I did was buy on Amazon. I bought like a cheap cast iron that had like a lip underneath the handle where the casting was put together. Since it was great, it enabled me to have a set that went from 4 to 24 in singles. And I traveled with them easily. I could train my clients who were non-discerning kettlebell users, as I was at the time. But since then, I've sold all of those kettlebells and rebought kettlebells that are good quality. And even in the good quality ones, I want to sell my 48 because the handle length is just slightly off, and like you start getting really picky, So
that kettlebell right there, that's behind me
yeah.
in the shaft.
Yeah.
This one has a smaller handle. It is from the same production line, but the handle is smaller. Let me turn off the telephone real quick. Wait a second. So here we go. And from this production line, the handle is even smaller than from my hollow core competitions. And I think that's just a production mistake or whatever have you. But I like the fact, I like it that you address this question. And I like the way you go about it. If you are in a position where you don't want to hit the gym, or you don't want to spend money on a gym membership, and you're on a very tight budget, and you want to get into this kettlebell thing because you see, wow, I can train my full body with one equipment, and then there's this great amount of knowledge and information out there that can really help me move forward, and that tight budget is relevant, then yeah, go out and buy whatever kind of kettlebell there is to you. Make sure it is round. At least it is round, not these rectangular ones. Make sure at least it is.
And also not the plastic,
round.
Like the colorful plastic cast. I'd also tell people to generally avoid vinyl wrapped and things like that, because
but you know what's funny?
Rub on your skin and stuff. So.
Exactly. But one of our clients, she trains exclusively she trained for a long time. She trained exclusively with these plastic kettlebells, and she was having the time of her life. And I was like, hey, well, okay, great. So I think what we sometimes, and I had this conversation with a client recently. I told him what we as avid kettlebell practitioners sometimes have to understand is that people come from a background of having no experience and no knowledge about kettlebell whatsoever. So sometimes we who are 400% above the average with our knowledge and the way how we do it, we come with these prerequisites like, oh, it got to be this, got to be that, got to be this, right?
Yeah.
Because we want them to get the best experience. But sometimes people be like, hey, listen, I got this plastic old kettlebell at home. I do my swings and my back pain went away. Hey, I love it. So go for it.
Exactly.
And what would be your take on the weights? What do you say?
I tend to always ask back what a fair assessment of their starting strength would be. I find that people often just have like a one-line question that they want a one-line answer to, but I don't think anything's that simple. I mean, we can get into the back pain stuff later, but the answer is almost always, it depends. So after getting some sort of assessment of their starting levels of strength, I think you can go a few different directions. If someone is relatively well versed in lifting in general, let's say they can knock out a few press ups, they can do a man can do a few pull-ups, can do a few press ups, has some experience in the gym, then what I might say is get something like 12, 16. And recently I've been saying, if you've got like a 12 and a 16, then you've got two options. You either go 20 and you've got a rack of singles that you can mix and match and train offset, or you go 12, 16 and buy something, I keep saying, buy something that scares you a bit. Something fucking heavy, whatever that means to you, whether it's 24 or 32 or whatever, because that thing is going to be your best coach. I promise you, there is no better coach than a heavy kettlebell. Once you know the fundamentals of how to hinge, how to, like, I've seen your progressions as well. Take someone through a deadlift, take someone through those lessons of how to hinge. You can get away with a lot of nonsense with 8 kilograms that you cannot get away with when you start getting to a meaningful weight, whatever that meaningful weight is.
And
that heavy kettlebell is going to be your swing. If you can't swing it, you'll deadlift it, or you'll hinge with it, or you'll squat with it, or you'll row it, or you'll carry it. Those are all really useful things that you don't get a response from when it's light. You can carry 5 kilos in each hand all day long and not get the benefits of a loaded carry. But if you're carrying something meaningful, you now have something where you can really overload locomotion, which we've spoken about the importance of staying on your feet, having strong feet, having strong hips, having strong locomotion. But if it's not heavy enough, it's not going to be a meaningful enough stress to elicit the response. So when people ask what weights, it's sort of, you can build your rack slowly and go for singles in a normal 4 kilogram increment, so you can offset your training. But more and more recently, I've been an advocate for men and women of buying something in your range that forces you to focus and enables you to progress to doing some sort of strength stuff. And chances are, once you can swing a kettlebell with decent form, you'll surprise yourself with how heavy you can swing safely.
Exactly. Well, great take. I like the way you take it with, hey, pick something up that's fairly heavy, that's going to be a good coach. Yeah, I do agree 100% with your assessment. One thing where I see it a little bit differently is I have my quarrels with this it depends stuff in the fitness industry. I do understand it, of course. I do understand it, where it comes from. But maybe you've made this experience as well, where you need a quick and fast solution to a problem. Then you start Googling, you start searching, and you get immediately mad if every article says it depends. You're like, hey, I just want something. Give me something. So that's what I've gravitated a little bit away from it. I said, you know what? Yes, this depends question is 100% real, but some people just want it black and white, right? So then I'm like, listen, from experience, generally speaking, women can start with an 8 kg and fellas can start with a 12 kg.
Okay.
Now, of course, there's differentiation. Some women might even have to start a little bit lighter. But the reason why I even tell women who never lifted kettlebells to stay away from anything below 8 is because you want to get used to the weight you have to handle the kettlebell. Most of the time,
at least aware of the pendulous.
Yeah. Most of the time, you want to move the kettlebell with the strongest muscles, which are attached to your hip, and not with your arm, right? So get used to this right away. That's why I love this aspect that you have. Hey man, grab something that's fairly heavy.
Yeah.
And to that point, we always made the same experience. When people get decent form down pat, I always tell them sometimes in the group sessions, I'm like, hey, you know what? This time, pick up a 16.
Mm-hmm.
So then they pick up a 16. They're like, ooh, and you see? Now it's forcing you to use your hips.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, the 12 feels like light, right? Exactly. So I do get it where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
I'm with you. I you've got to give
because let me interject real quick. Because when the individual assessment sometimes just isn't possible, and when you write a book, for example, you don't make a case for every individual assessment that you've had in your career, or maybe that can be a title of a book. It's a great idea, actually.
You're right.
Right, but you talk to the general population, and the same happens in a video. Mm-hmm. Where you have condensed information brought to you in an easy and understandable way, which of course is nuanced. A lot of stuff is left away. And hey man, if we talk about the marketing perspective, when I do videos, sometimes I leave stuff away intentionally.
Right.
To either not overwhelm you or to have you subscribe to the stuff. To be like, I want to know more.
Yeah.
So that's where this question or this aspect, it depends, sometimes gets on my nerves. I'm like, yeah, but give people something to start with, right?
No, I like that. I really appreciate, like, even from what you put out there, I appreciate your honesty. I think it's refreshing. And I think people do want just that quick fire answer. And quite often that will be, it's sort of a tiered response, right? I might say, get yourself a 12, but it depends because blah, 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 right? So if they're willing to read a little bit further.
Exactly. And that's what I do. I do this sometimes in the comments. I'm like, somebody asked the question, and sometimes I'm like, listen, this might sound like an individual situation, the way to describe it, but how about try starting with a 12 and see what happens? Yeah. Sometimes we in the fitness industry, we're so concerned about, but the person has to make the perfect decision when parameter X and Y have to be aligned perfectly and the sun and the moon have to shine. Listen, man, just give them something basic. And one of the mantras that I live by now is when people ask the question, that's what you see in the comments. What I most of the time reply is, hey, is that good for me? Well, try it out. Experiment and see what your body says. Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky, I read 2 of his books. He was a Soviet sports scientist. What he said in the end of his books is always the same. The coach who experiments is the one who wins. So
try everything so you can do anything.
Exactly.
Don't be harp on about. Exactly.
Don't be scared. And nobody is stupid. Or maybe I have to phrase it differently. I don't think people with a sane mind walk into a store, pick up a 32 and be like, I'm going to swing this thing.
No, 100%.
All right? So right. Give them something that's lighter, have them get started. And one thing where I really, where I'm interested in, because you mentioned this, and that's where this conversation now leads to, is you've said the stress has to be meaningful, right? In order to get a response.
Very important, yeah.
But if we pivot the picture a little bit and you have a person who never lifted anything in their life before and now they do a suitcase walk with a 8 or 12 kg, it might be enough. It challenges them, right?
That's meaningful though, because it's all
meaningful is the cue.
It's a relative term. Meaningful is relative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, one of the things
meaningful. Yeah, I like this.
One of the studios I use in London, there's a lot of people who are aware of my account and have said to me, like, it's not good for your back to swing 92 kilos. And I said, well, it depends. I've been training hard for 20 years and I've been focusing on this specifically for a decade. And the stress that I require is different to the stress that you require. And it's very important that it's relative.
Such a great term.
Right, because I've got plenty of people, especially if, because I work as a back specialist, I've become something of an injury coach. I'm not just the back guy, because when I fix someone's back, they'll talk at a dinner table and they'll send me a friend who's got an elbow and a shoulder issue. So,
and an important note for those coaches who are listening, that's still the best and major way to get clients. Do not. Sometimes I think, especially the youngins, and I mean we were young too, but the youngins, the Padawans, right? They sometimes think that it's all about the TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube account, when in reality, it is mouth-to-mouth marketing.
Yeah.
When somebody refers somebody, the trust level is immediately given. You don't have to earn it, right?
So much more powerful, and you don't end up emptying your bank account into Facebook ads.
Yeah.
You know,
keep going. Where you were with the back specialist stuff, right?
Yeah, and you
bringing
know,
heavy weights.
Yeah, I think when you are coaching people through injury rehabilitation, there's someone in particular at the moment who has just had a fairly significant car accident. He is a husband to an existing client of mine. But what is a meaningful stress to someone who has a broken elbow and nerve damage, cervical spine issues and lumbar spine issues, all as a result of a fairly significant car crash? The stress, the meaningful stress, is very relative, and it never becomes more obvious than when you're dealing with someone like that, who, walking down the street, you look at this 30-year-old man and think, oh, he's probably quite capable or quite strong, but actually the meaningful stress is the lightest version of a hip band and a very small EMS machine to make sure that, you know, nerve stimulation is still happening on the side that's had nerve damage. We're still creating some meaningful muscle tension and movement and synovial fluid production around joints and proper coordination of limb movement and all that sort of stuff. I've been working with him for probably 3 weeks now. He hasn't touched a weight, but we've had meaningful stress from balance work, because that's CNS focused, from coordination based tasks, from the implementation of EMS machines, and from, I'm not even kidding, a 2XS, so like very, very small hip band, which I get him to put around his forearms, not his wrist, because he's got damage at his wrist, but mid forearm, and do ever so slight tension-based shoulder articulations, cars, pails and rails, those sorts of things. That is a very meaningful stress to that person that wouldn't even wake me up if I was doing it in my sleep. So the stress is very relative, and I think that's really important for people to understand.
Oh yeah,
but your own relative stress changes fast, especially if you're injured. So.
I felt the same with the swing now, where a 48 kg now I really feel cool with it, right? With a double-handed swing, and I feel I'm kind of scared to say this, but I kind of get used to a double 28 jerk in clean, because
congratulations, man.
It's fascinating.
Right.
I'm not saying comfortable. I'm still struggling with it, but the 24s are now, I can put a check mark on them. Like, hey, now I feel safe with them. I feel really solid with them. But
I think that's one of the biggest sort of hacks to my own progress, is that when I only had sort of up to 24, I remember I said to my wife at the time, it was like 3 years ago, I said to her, for Christmas, could you get me the beast? I want a 48.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time you touch it, you think, what have I done? This is a monstrosity. This thing is so heavy, so huge. I'm never going to be able to manipulate this thing. And the second you start moving that, every single weight you've moved south of that weight completely shifts in your mind.
Yeah, this is crazy.
It completely shifts.
Most
and that's why I've continued to buy heavier. I've got 48, 56, 68 and 92 kilos sitting in front of me in my living room, because every single time, you know, the 68 up until 2 weeks ago was the heaviest kettlebell I owned. And then I took the 92 for a ride, and now I swing that a few times a week. I'll do sets with the 92. And now when I touch the 68, it's like, oh, this is a friendly, easy sort of weight to move around.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy. I call it the how did I call it? The scare method, or scaring your body, something with scare.
Right.
The scare system, where you intentionally pick up something that's heavy,
mm-hmm.
and then you go to your working weight. So if my working weight was 24, I do a set with 24, then I jump up to the 28, and then I go back to the 24s, and I'm like, ooh, they feel light.
You know where you've got that from? Because that exists. I've taken that from a very particular place, but where have you got that from?
It's just, I just came to think about it, but I've heard some kettlebell sport folks use it.
Oh no, so I took it from the world of powerlifting, because before I got really into kettlebell training, I've trained with kettlebells for a decade, but I trained with kettlebells as a supplement to my barbell lifts in the gym. And I would do my sort of main lifts, and then I would train with a kettlebell, very much as sort of not a complete afterthought, but it was secondary. Right. So when it came to the barbell lifts, especially for something like a squat, very frequently what you do is overload the bar just for the purposes of unracking. You can't do this for a deadlift. What you do is you create hyper recruitment.
You walk out, your body's like, oh my God.
For a squat, you might even not walk out. You don't want to fatigue yourself before a big squat, right? So you just
rack
it out of the rack, hold it for 1 to 4 seconds, 1 to 5 seconds.
Wow.
Put it back. And in those few seconds, you're mentally rehearsing the squat, going through your cues of bending the bar over your back, tightening your lats, torsion tension through the hips, etc., etc. And you've hyper recruited muscle now. Now your body is ready to squat 200 kilos. So when you back it off to 170, your body's like, oh, this feels nice now.
That's easy.
Instead of working up to 170 and your body thinks like, shit, I went from the couch to this. Now you've gone all the way up to 200 and backed off, and your body thinks, well, this I've got all day, dude.
Wow. Yeah. Scare is the scare method. I can't think of how I called it. Something with scare.
So, I mean, you experimented your way there.
Yeah, I'm trying myself. Yep.
From being in sort of spit and sawdust powerlifting gyms and having guys like that sort of show me the way through powerlifting, when I came over to kettlebells, I was like, I need some way of doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So before we pivot into the low back stuff, because you've mentioned something which sounds fascinating and interesting, because one thing where I see, let's just stick to this first, and then let's jump to the other thing. Let me write this down, because I always have to write stuff down, because then I can listen and I don't have to keep my thoughts from
notebooks
chasing away.
In front of me right here for the same reason.
Same. It's awesome. So let's jump back to this low back thing. You've mentioned this gentleman that you are having in your sessions right now. What it sounds like to me, and I'd like to get your take on it because you're more experienced in that regard. Aren't you taking more of a therapist standpoint instead of a trainer's standpoint? Do you think they can merge, or do you think a trainer is a trainer and a therapist is a therapist?
This is a conversation that my wife and I have on a regular basis. My wife is a psychotherapist, and interestingly enough, she came through the world of fitness. She was a Les Mills tribe coach, so whatever preconceived notions we all have of like class-based coaches and the Les Mills model of movement and blah blah blah, whatever. Let's put that to one side. And
Who cares? Yeah.
She was a Les Mills coach for a very long time, gained some level of mastery with them and their system, but now has been working as a psychotherapist for just shy of a decade. Wow. So we frequently have a conversation about how muddled the role of a coach or a personal trainer can become, whether I'm working with an injury rehabilitation case or a strength person or lower back pain person. It doesn't matter. When you show up at the same time each week or at the same time each day for a person with an energy that is both positive and generous, because it's not for me, it's for them, the role of coach and the role of therapist can often become quite intertwined or quite difficult to differentiate. I don't for a second see myself as a therapist. That would be a massive presupposition. I don't have the qualifications to be a therapist. it's incredibly useful being able to take conversations that I have with my clients and workshop them with my wife and say, like, how do you think would have been the best way for me to respond to this conversation, which has notes of eating disorder baked into it, and I don't want to fuel eating disorder nutritional habits, but we still have to talk about food and nutrition with this client, or this person has brought in issues with anxiety and self-belief and all the rest of it. And yes, I'm their strength coach, but actually there's still it's all intertwined, right? Our mindset when we walk into these sessions speaks a lot to our physical strength as well as our mental strength and all the rest of it. So, you know, the question you asked is I think it's one that you could do an entire podcast series on, and each new guest would have a different take on it. And each coach has a different level of emotional intelligence, empathy, willingness to go there, etc., etc. So like and again, their relationship with the client will inform the depth to which that relationship goes as well. So it depends on who I have in front of me and the purpose I feel I'm serving for that person, or even at that time in their life for that person. Because for some clients you have for many years and you'll see them through emotional turbulence, and then your training pulls back a little bit, and when they're through that time of emotional turbulence, your training can pick back up again. But I think that the role that we have, the strength coach, or as the back pain specialist or whatever, the role that we have, it is both. It is definitely more weighted towards what our expertise are in, but it's unfortunate that more coaches, more trainers don't have some form of education in, at the very least, empathetic communication.
100%, man.
Right.
Empathy. I think you can win the game being a average strength coach and a hyper powerful and awesome empathetic human being. You'll always win. You'll always win. If your empathy, if somebody walks into the gym, I like how you said it, man. When the coach and the therapist kind of melt together when they walk into the room, and the way you say hello, and when you feel like they carry a little bit of backpack, you don't have to unpack it, but you're just here to give them, motivation, give them love, give them good vibes, and then so that they can get a move on. And yeah, the empathy. And that's what, we talked about this before we got started with recording. For some areas, especially in the kettlebell world, it sometimes looks like empathy is lacking. And when empathy is lacking, people feel that they're not enough. People feel that there's always something wrong. People feel that, my form is still off. For example, I just recently showed me a Turkish get-up, which for me looks totally fine. You can do this Turkish get-up forever. And then he's like, I know my form is off. I'm like, where is it off? It's totally fine. But you've probably been drilled to, you got to always do this and that. And maybe you've missed one of the cues of the get-up. Who cares about it anyway? If you're coming back down solid to the ground and back up, it's good. But empathy, and I love it. We have to add empathy to the curriculum of becoming a coach. And last week, I've had a conversation with Dr. Michael Yessis, who said most coaches lack the ability to become a biomechanical analyst of the movement. So that's what you have to add in as well. Oh my God. It's fascinating, man.
That was probably the biggest valuable takeaway I had from becoming a back pain specialist, like understanding how to watch someone with a much more trained eye. And understand that what you might be seeing isn't a pattern for injury now, but possibly one down the line. And if you have the confidence and skill to pull the session back from where it is to reteach something that is more fundamental, so that you go back to 100%. That thing.
100%.
One of the cockiest lines I've ever said to clients is, I am different as a coach to other people, because where you might have a Microsoft and get viruses all the time, I'm the Mac, and you're not going to know you're not going to get viruses.
I love this.
Right, so you won't even get the notification.
You're bulletproof.
Yeah,
I bulletproof
you're not even going to get the notifications that your virus software has interrupted something. No,
I'm your firewall, man.
right. I'm the firewall, and we're going to establish such strong habits.
Yeah.
That actually, when we get into the training where I can push you to some ugly places, those habits are still there.
Exactly. So let's just drill a little bit more down the line of this therapeutic aspect. Now, you mentioned the way you train with that gentleman who has had this unfortunate car accident.
Yeah.
To me, the way you work with this person sounds like more of a therapeutic process than a trainer's process.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you draw the line? It's like the way you've conversed about how you work with that gentleman sounds like a physiotherapist, right? You go about it from a position where I would refer out, right? I would not even take on a client like this. I would say, listen, I have a great referral network. I have great guys who do that stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's where you have to get started. And they probably get started there first anyways, right? Because they're not in a form right now where they can think about regular exercising training. They have to get their levels back up to zero, right? Because they're in the minus. Nothing, yeah, right? Yeah. So that's one question that I asked. Where's the line? And the second question that I want to ask is, I don't know if you're familiar with functional patterns.
Yeah, I know functional patterns.
I saw these guys
arguments with Naudi Aguilar, but there we go.
Yeah, me too. So, so I saw these guys do some stuff. I don't want to say disguised, but it sounds like disguised under
you might have just said it, but there we go.
Yeah, I might have just said it. So there we go. So yeah, and disguised under the impression of this being a therapeutic approach. For example, jumping around with 2 kettlebells and then calling it a therapist session. I don't get it. I really don't get it. So where do you come from as a low back or as a specialist in that regard who helps people just to move well before they even want to move often?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Thanks. It's one that I have struggled with in the last few years, because when I qualified as a lower back pain specialist 4 years ago, I thought, is this now what I am? Because I've spent a long time working as a strength coach or as a personal trainer in all sort of normal forums, and worked in gyms, and I've worked in high-end studios and all that sort of stuff. But does that now mean that I'm starting again, but as a back split? Do I have to change hats?
Basically? That's exactly my question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's been a fascinating journey, just personal journey, to kind of understand who I am in this space now, because I am still both of those things. I am still someone who coaches professional athletes to an elite level, but then also someone who can't balance on one leg. And I think I feel quite comfortable in this space because of the time I spent to re-qualify or to extend my qualifications as a back pain specialist, which mm-hmm. is much more therapeutic, and did mean that I habitually spend many hours talking to people about their pain. In the assessment process, the McGill designed sort of assessment process, we spend between 2 and 3 hours doing the initial back consultation. Now, this back pained person has probably never been spoken to for that long by any professional they've seen. Whether it's a physio, a chiro, an osteo, their doctor, a surgeon, no one has spoken to them for this long. No one. Mm-hmm. So to understand the multifaceted elements to their pain, not just the injury, because pain is expressed in many different ways. Mm-hmm. Someone can have injured their shoulder, but be telling you about their lower back on the opposite side. And so you may have to sort of look at locomotion mechanics or their feet or that sort of thing. But I think that I know where I'm good and I know where I need to refer out. I'm always pretty quick to assume that the person I'm referring to knows more, because I think, you know, I have a bit of imposter syndrome. I've worked very hard to get to where I am, but when people acknowledge where I am, I feel like, oh, I shouldn't be here. You know, I'm still new to this sort of thing. So I try and
The
refer
more
out.
it's like Aristotle or Plato said it, right? I think Aristotle, right? Well, Socrates. The more you know, the less you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It is exactly what when you have these for example, in the podcast, and I can't recount how many times I said this on this podcast. The more I talk to people who are very intelligent, great minds, not only in the kettlebell world, sometimes it goes into different directions, the more I understand, man, I don't know anything.
Yeah, I feel the same all the time. I feel the same all the time. And I think that's really, I think it's so important because it speaks to the way that you walk through life with all things. You know, when I approach the basics of kettlebell movement as if I don't know, it keeps me secure and safe and progressing, because I never take for granted a swing. Never. I never take for granted moving a weight around. I'm always moving that weight around as though I'm a back pained person trying to get back to being pain free. And to just finish answering the question about the guy who I'm helping post car accident, I'm helping him in coordination with those other professionals. So while I'm the one seeing him,
interesting,
I'm not the only one bringing thought to the programming, and I'm coordinating this approach that I have with helping him with esteemed professionals in Canada, in the UK, and in South Africa that are all more qualified than me, but are also using me as a conduit for their information. I'm the one that can get to the person. I'm the one that has the most knowledge out of all of those people when it comes to spines. But when it comes to nerve damage, I've got someone who's assisting the process because I'm not as experienced as he is in using things like EMS machines. And the role that EMS machines can play when used in coordination with things like cars or pails or rails, and where they are best placed to be used with someone who can barely move without significant pain.
And that's where you see a definite application of EMS machines, because EMS has been thrown around, and I think recently has been touted as the new way to train, right? And you see it's electric muscle stimulation, right?
That's right.
With the pads, right?
Yeah.
And you see application, and now it makes sense. I was always like, why do they use EMS machines with these currents or triggers that they send down the muscle fibers, or whatever have you? Why not just lift or train regularly? But the way you describe it now, I see most definitely an approach, and it makes sense.
So I'll give you a quick example of how I'm using it with this guy. He's broken his elbow down his left side, and as a result can't really move that arm. There's also fairly significant damage to the left side shoulder and massive nerve damage to right side shoulder as a result of cervical spine impingement at the nerve root. Okay. So what you have here is a situation where someone can't load bear. I can't put a weight vest on him because he can't hold anything in hands, but I can't put a weight vest on him either to create some load there because of his shoulders, clavicles, and cervical spine damage. His coordination is poor as a result of massive head trauma. So what I've got is a situation where this person was relatively well muscled before. And what I'm trying to do is keep a nerve alive that is impinged at the root, and B, try and stem the flow of muscle atrophy as much as possible by keeping the communication along a nerve root line alive while I'm not able to move the limb that is connected to the muscles. So I can't get him to really do much in the way of a shoulder cars on the right side, a shoulder car rather on the right side. But what I can do is get an EMS machine on pec minor and onto his delt, and have that flickering away at a very acceptable intensity while we go through a car on that side that might be 10 degrees of movement rather than 45, but with muscle activation that more closely mimics load bearing and full range of motion.
Wow. So you're passively loading the muscle, so to speak, right?
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
But the muscle
system is aware it's working.
It's working, so it is active, but you have to kind of go around it because he's not able to move his body or move his joints or bones or whatever have you the way a normal person would. But instead of just letting this linger away and letting this stuff die off and say, like, okay, well, you can't move, so there we go. You use a different way to still get some stimulus in.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things with nerves is that if you let an impinged nerve, sure, you can go like a nerve flossing route as well. We have some elements of nerve flossing going through the program as well. But that is really to free up a nerve enough that you can encourage activation along the line of the nerve, whether it's muscle contractions or movement of the limb in general. But if that isn't taken care of quite quickly, the nerve will pack up and die, and that's irreparable. And what you end up with there is very common in wrestlers because they have massive impingements and compacted discs through their cervical spine, is huge atrophy down their arms where, like, if you look at someone like, do you know who Buzz Rutten is?
Yeah. Okay. Legend.
Okay, yeah, absolute legend. But for those who don't know, he was a heavyweight martial arts champion and fought in the UFC as well as other organizations.
His pride fights. Slapping guys left and right.
That's huge success with those heel of the hand strikes.
Oh my God, this dude.
But if you look at him now, he's got one arm. I mean, he's got two arms, but only one of them has any degree of muscle mass on it because of nerve root impingement.
I gotta check this. Wow.
You have a look. He doesn't use one arm, and it's basically like a child's arm on one side. I mean, I'm only mentioning this because he talks about it very openly and like sort of makes jokes about it. And
but I just wanted to say the way he's such a funny guy, he probably makes jokes about it.
Yeah. He's got a great sense of humor. And he mentions it.
Okay.
He has a less than a like PC name for what he calls arm. You can imagine a Dutch man, that was a heavyweight martial arts fighter from the
Don't tell him what's politically correct or not. Don't tell this guy.
So my point is that like he had massive nerve root damage. I don't know what steps he took to recover the damage, or if he could have, but I'll use him as an example for now. If we would have taken someone like him virtually within the same week as the major injury and had him on a protocol to floss the nerve, activate the nerve, go through acceptable amounts of articular rotations of the specific joints required, that may have been a recoverable injury and he may have had full muscle development in both arms still. But you have to act on nerves quite quickly.
But and we have to understand, right? This is stuff that we're just finding out, so many new things. So I imagine when Bas was getting out of finishing his career, there was no research, there was no knowledge about this,
and also there was no the technology that was around, because TENS machines and EMS machines have been around for long enough that he could have used it, but they were so expensive and large, and really they were only in sort of not high-end clinics is the wrong word, but very, very niche clinics and hospitals. Whereas now I have an app on my phone, and the small EMS machine I use is in my backpack. I attach it to the person, pull up the app, take him through a protocol whilst I'm assisting movement. So
that just reminds me of the fact that we have to be grateful. What a time to be alive right now with all this emerging research, and even with kettlebells, right? Where we are finding out new ways to move, finding out new ways to implement stuff. And that's why it is so important, the way you said it, man. Do everything so you can do anything. Right. Man, this is such a great catchphrase. So I have another question on this, Glenn. can you? I've read one of at least part of it, a book from Dr. Stuart McGill. I also had him on a podcast when we had a conversation about it, about spines and stuff. So my question would be, from our experience, we have a lot of people walk into the gym with back pain, but not, I call it, not, as far as I know and as far as they know, no structural damage. It's just back pain. Then they start moving, and 95% of them get better. Back pain is gone. So in that regard, I would say it is most of the time related to muscle atrophy or weak muscles, or wrong movement patterns, which we can correct, and then we load them, then they get stronger, so back pain goes away. So can you classify, to a certain extent, back pain? Is there a segment of back pain that you can just take care of very easily, where you can give a broad answer, like do some swings, do some walking, do some farmer's walks, you're good? And are there other areas of pain where you have to say, listen, I got to talk to you for 3 hours?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's such a deep topic. Back pain is such a deep topic, and it's so convoluted. Everything that goes into someone's back pain, their experience of it, it's wrapped up in their psychology as well as in their physicality. I tell you something right now in answer to your question. I wouldn't lay out one pejorative piece of advice. I wouldn't, it's always, it depends. And
You're in the matrix of it depends. I got it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, especially with
I'm Neo, my man. I'm Neo.
Yeah,
I left the matrix.
Dodging the bullets of those questions. Yeah, 100%. So
definitely.
Look, I think if you've got someone who comes into your gym and has, it's one of those expressions that Professor McGill has sort of taught all of his Padawans, as you've said, or to sort of laugh at or shirk off, is non-specific back pain or just degenerative disc disease. These sort of terms that are bandied about are the layman's headline for something they don't understand. It's never non-specific. You could always find a root cause, but chances are, if you get someone who isn't in chronic back pain that is so debilitating that they can't roll over in bed or cough or sneeze or put on their seatbelt or whatever, if they're able to walk into your gym and describe a low-level back pain or a dull ache type back pain or a constant niggling back pain, it's just always there. Locomotion is a great place to start. Whether it is very light sled push pulls, if they can accommodate axial loading, because you're axially loading their spine. If they can't accommodate any sort of axial loading, then you would literally just get them to walk. Walking is one of the simplest but best things that you could do for a back, because it's taking advantage of the natural oblique slings we have in our body, where your shoulders and hips work in opposite relation to one another. One of the things that I love most about kettlebells is how you can take advantage of oblique slings with kettlebell use.
And let me just interject real quick right there. I just had this in a video recently. I see even two more aspects. You mentioned these oblique slings. I love that description. Two things that I even see more with kettlebells is cross education. So if I clean with the right side, my left side gets worked on as well. And I'm right now reading Tom Meyer's Anatomy Trains book. And when he talks about the superficial back line, he talks about these lines. And then he has one line he calls the functional line, which is like an X throughout your body. So it goes from the right side down to the left side. So if you do a hybrid swing, for example, you're constantly moving down that line.
Constantly. So that is the biggest thing that is left out of training, is like
unilateral and cross education. It's
100%.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. In fact, with the injury guy that we were talking about before, that cross education is something that I will be using in the coming few months. With a side that can lift weights, it will lift weights.
Yeah,
even light, because now you start getting hormonal responses, then you start getting blood flow, you start getting a cardiovascular spike, which helps with recovery in general. I've already got him sitting in a sauna every single day because that's cardio. Sitting in a sauna is cardio, right? His heart rate is at about 140 for an hour.
Oof.
He sits in a moderate temperature sauna for an hour because he's got one in his house. So he sits in that sauna for between 40 minutes and an hour, 5 times a week. So he's doing cardiovascular training, blood flow promoting. And actually, if your cardio system is not strong, your recovery is going to be dog shit. So
the heart.
Yeah.
You have to have a powerful heart. So let me just ask another question. I do get that you have to talk. Let's take the gentleman with the unfortunate accident again. So this person, let's say, complains about pain. I do understand that you have to have a very detailed, analyzed approach in the assessment, understanding what's wrong, what's broken, where are you coming from. But can we make it even easier? And I think you've already answered this question to a certain extent. We can make it easier to a certain extent if people are able to walk, if people don't have if people don't have a tragical accident or whatever have you. Isn't it most of the time in that case, let's leave these very convoluted and extreme cases away.
Yeah.
Isn't it most of the time that it's weak muscles?
No. No, I don't think we could just blame it on lack of strength. In fact, I think if we're going to blame it on something, it's crap movement habits. It's not weak muscles, it's poor loading strategies. And essentially that's what crap movement habits are.
So let me just interject again, and because maybe you can give me feedback on that topic.
Sure.
Prior to kettlebells, I was doing regular bodybuilding type style training. And I was also doing very heavy lifting for my body weight, for heavy squats, heavy bench, heavy deadlift.
I know you're waiting for me to ask. What were you benching? What were you deading?
I'm a lightweight dude, so I was benching 110 kg for 2-3 reps,
hey, awesome.
And I was deadlifting 170 something,
heavy.
and squat was 130, 140 ish.
Hey, that's good, man. It takes mastery to get up to those numbers. So
and you know, I was always mad at the certain lad who was lifting 200 kg, and that's 450 pounds, right? I was always mad at this guy.
Yeah, 440 pounds.
Because I was not 450, right? Because I wasn't able to move beyond 170. And I was like, you know what? I have to accept it. That's my limit, and I'm fine with it. But let me just move on with the question. So I was doing all that heavy stuff. I had a lot more muscle back then, and I was more bulkier. So all of a sudden I felt in my lower back region, it's not a pain, but a pulling. Something like if you were really tensing my erector muscles, especially in the lower back area, as if something is really massively tight, to the point where I had to sit down. No pain, but just incredible tight. So I was doing stretches and everything, which gave it some relief, but then it came back. And it stuck with me. And I was like, how is that possible? I'm deadlifting these weights. I'm heavy, pressing, squatting. What's up? Come to find out, after switching to kettlebells, that's gone. Now my question, why is that? Could you analyze it? At least
analyze. When you were lifting heavy, lifting in the gym, you weren't also doing suitcase carries.
No.
Right.
With one side only, right? No.
Yes, no. Yeah, you weren't
farmers. I was doing farmers.
Farmers, but that's still bilateral. Okay, so what it sounds like to me is a strength discrepancy, not a tension issue. It sounds like you were much stronger on one side than the other through something that may have been like your QL, much stronger QL on one side than the other. It may have been like an overly tight belt that you were wearing that was putting too much pressure on your psoas, which is why it was shooting back, and you felt like it was like almost like a psoas.
was wearing belts all the time with these heavy weights. Okay. Yeah.
It may have been. It could have been a number of different things. You could have gone from driving lots in your car and having tight hip flexors to not opening up your hip flexors enough, and then trying to do sumo deadlift or what. Like, I don't know how you deadlifted. I don't know what your day job was. I don't know how you lived your life. there's a lot of things, which is why it depends.
Yeah.
So tempting
Yeah.
to always go down that path.
The Matrix
But,
again.
yeah, exactly. I'm in there.
And it's true. And let me just reiterate again, because sometimes people take stuff out of context. It is 100% true what Glenn is saying, that 99%, or most of the time, it depends. But where I'm coming from is I just want to share a perspective where we can give some general recommendations as well. That's
so my
point.
General recommendation back to Gregory in the past: train unilaterally as well.
I can't believe it. And after picking up kettlebells, I was training unilaterally.
Well, unilaterally, you're training unilaterally. You're training across oblique slings. You're all of a sudden including loaded locomotion. You're training from half kneeling positions, full kneeling positions, standing positions. You're training going from standing positions to the floor and back up again. So all of a sudden, the thing that I love most about something like a movement that I've obsessed over is the Turkish get up. I think if you are healthy, every single person and their mums should be doing Turkish get-ups, because as a back specialist, something like the Turkish get-up teaches you to load your hips, not your spine. It teaches you to move about your hips, not through your spine. A very important word there is about your hips. If you understand leverages at all, you understand
treating the hip like a fulcrum, right?
Exactly. So if you are healthy, I'm not telling everyone to start doing Turkish get-ups that have slap tears in their shoulders and all sorts of things. If you are healthy, everyone should find a way to include a Turkish get-up in their training. Now, if my wife is listening to this, I mean you too. So yeah, I know that they bore a lot of people because they're slow, or because they're hard, or because it feels like there's too much coordination required, or it's like a dance and they don't remember dancing moves and it's too much to remember. I've heard it all. But I've also been able to teach every single person I've ever met how to do a Turkish get-up well, safely, and fast. I think, you know, one of my first CPDs was actually in pre and postnatal care. And one of the most important things in taking prenatal women and postnatal mums back to being pain-free movers is teaching them how to load their hips and not their spine. How to pick up your child from the floor and get to and from that position by using a back lunge windscreen wiper hinge to your heel to get to your child, rather than tipping over from the hip and rolling your spine.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that there's so much truth in understanding that loading the spine, or the hip, and having a strong hip is such a good starting point for a healthy life. Strong hips, your strongest muscles sit in the hip. And when we have people walk in here, when they hinge, what do most people do? What do most beginners do? They bend the spine, they flex the spine, they load from a bent, they pick up stuff with a bent spine. And I love what you say, that the eyes of a coach gets better when you learn more. It's exactly. I just had a conversation again with one of our clients, and her boyfriend now is experiencing again always the same situation in the back, always the same. And when he's in the sessions, in the small group sessions, I try to reach out to him and say, listen, it's all about in the hips. I still see you moving through the spine. You always use the spine. You rarely use the hips. So then he gets used to using the hips, which is great in these 45 minutes that we have here. But I know once he goes out, once he leaves the gym, he's back into this old pattern again, lifting up stuff with his spine.
Well, do you know what one of the analogies I have is as a back coach? One of the things I tell people all the time, because so much of what I do is habit changing. So
Yeah.
Let's take this analogy as like a quick visual example of what I'm trying to explain. You take a wire coat hanger, one of those cheap, shitty coat hangers that we all have in our home and we hate them. If you take that coat hanger and you slam it as hard as you can against a lamppost, it's going to warp, right? But you can flatten that thing back out and there will be virtually no visible damage on the wire coat hanger. If you take that wire coat hanger and bend it end to end slowly, but fully compress it end to end, there's no traumatic force here. Slowly bend it one way and then reverse it, and one way and then reverse it. Do it 5 times. The thing will melt in half. So what you liken those two examples to, slamming the wire coat hanger against a lamppost is like pulling a max effort deadlift and having shitty form. You might get away with it. And chances are you'll know you had crappy form, but you'll be fine. You take your recovery, you don't lift that heavy for a couple of weeks, you'll be fine. Now the other analogy, bending it end to end with no traumatic force. That is you picking up your kid with poor spine posture. That is you putting on your shoes with really bad form. That is you lifting the socks out of the bottom drawer in your house with crappy form. That is you emptying the dishwasher. We do these things 1,000 times a day. Back and forth and back and forth, we bend that coat hanger. Never a traumatic force. And at the end of it, you step off a curb and you slightly misstep. Your back goes and you go, oh, it was that, or it was the kettlebell. It wasn't. It was thousands of reps done poorly.
It was the death of 1,000 cuts. It is.
That's it. That's perfect. It. Exactly, Gregory. Thank you.
That's it, man. It is exactly what it is.
I've used that exact expression, death by paper cuts. Exactly.
And the funny thing is, you don't feel that. I love how Dr. Stuart McGill describes it. He says, well, people say that spines are strong. Well, they are until they're not. Exactly. Exactly, right? Or not strong. He says, not strong. They are resilient. Yeah. Well, spines are resilient until they're not.
Well, they're not. So, I mean, you should see the way that me and my wife move around the house. We are like robots. Honestly, I don't do anything if I can help it.
Hey, and wow, now that I'm just thinking about when I brush my teeth and I'm spitting the water out and I'm pushing my hips back. Right. I always push those hips back because my body is instantly telling me like, that feels crappy when I start bending the spine. But funny thing is when I sometimes tell people when you overdo it is if this pen drops to the floor, easy. If you pick it up once with a bent spine, it's totally fine. But you have to be able to make the distinction of understanding, I do this motion 1,000 times a day, you better be careful and low from your hips. I do one
accumulation. It's simple stress accumulation.
Oh God, this is so real, man.
They are building a mountain of their own demise, one grain of rice at a time, and they don't even.
One grain of rice at a time.
All of a sudden, there's an avalanche of rice coming down on top of it, because it's all of these little innocuous movements and actions that we take for granted all day, every day. And then the person, the office worker, the mum, the whatever, wants to come into the gym and train hard. The capacity is not there. Professor McGill has one of his master clinicians happens to live in London. I've been absolutely privileged to sort of spend a bit of time with him, spend time in his gym. His name's Joel Proskowitz, and he is a master clinician for a reason. He is a master at what he does and understanding the spine. And he is a big advocate for just moving like a robot, not taking any of these movements for granted.
Like a robot.
Yeah, you should.
That's a great
see
catchphrase.
How he moves. I've actually lost my train of thought of why I was going to bring him up, but he says the same thing, that you cannot take these movements for granted. You look at someone's movement habits, you see how they choose to sit in a chair, you see how they choose to get up from that chair.
You see it immediately. You see it in seconds. When we have the kettlebells right there in front of the mirror.
Right.
I see it in a split second, the way they pick up the kettlebell. And sometimes I'm yelling through the gym. I'm like, how are you guys picking that stuff up? And I'm like, listen, treat the AKG like a 48. You pick up the 8 like this, like the hunchback from Notre Dame. And then when we swing and when we train, your form is tight. I love it. And that's what I say all the time. I like when we stop, put it down carefully, because people be like, oh, I'm done. And then they automatically go back out from the training mode into the...
You're not done till it's not in your hands.
You put it down safely. You put it down in the rack safely. And we get these comments as well. Hey, Gregory, you know what? I've hurt my back when I was placing the kettlebell into the back of my seat in my car. I'm like, exactly, because you moved the weight outside your center of mass, and now you're not loading your hips, which is already not an easy thing to do. You load your spine.
Right.
And here you go with these thousands, the death of 1,000 cuts, with these hundreds of thousands of times where you loaded the, excuse me, loaded the dishwasher improperly or whatever have you, and boom. And you mentioned one thing that I have to bring up as well. And then they're like, it's the kettlebell's fault. Or it's the equipment's fault. And now you talk to a doctor, and here goes the circle. Then you talk to the doc, and he's like, oh, you never should have picked up the kettlebell. So then you discontinue the thing that can help you. You put the blame on this thing instead of understanding your movement patterns.
That's 100% it. It's so important. So like, you want to talk about like a pejorative that I can put out there for back pain is move as if you have back pain. It's one of the questions I asked Professor McGill when I was doing his seminar in Holland, 4+ years ago. I said to him, this is all fantastic. It's unbelievably useful moving forward, but I don't just see back pained people. So how can I help the people who aren't in back pain avoid ever being that person? And he said, that is the goose that lays the golden egg. You'll give that one up. You're never going to help someone who hasn't been in pain because it's not meaningful enough. But it's something that I work every single day in every single session to instill, that you lift light like it's heavy, so heavy will be light, and you respect every weight, whether it's your backpack, your child, the kettlebell, it doesn't matter, because stress accumulations and load tolerances are real. And this is what I was going to say about Joel. One of my favorite analogies that he gave me, and the reason why you have to treat everything with respect, is this video game analogy. So if you've ever played a video game where your character has a life bar that goes from sort of green to red, you've got two levels in this video game analogy. The first one, you're running around, it's a bit of a shoot 'em up game. You're running around like a newbie person in this game, and you're not taking cover. You're shooting the enemies and you're being shot. Your life bar is being depleted, but the avatar still moves the same. There's no visible change in how he's behaving. The next level is the boss. And the boss basically slaps your avatar once and you die because you had no life in the life bar left. Well, we don't have the advantage or the luxury of seeing where our life bar is. We don't have that luxury. We don't get to see how depleted our spine is, or how one stress tolerance is completely maxed out versus the other is still in the green section. So if you treat everything, if you treat that first level of the video game, like you've got to avoid every shot, like you've got to take cover and take shots like you're smart, like you're not trying to get hit, not like you've got a full life bar, but like it's real life and you can't afford a single bullet to touch you. When you get to the boss level, which is your max deadlift, which is your 28, double 28 clean and jerk, which is your whatever, you've got capacity for some error without injury. I know, right? Brilliant analogy. It's not mine. It's not mine.
And I had to force myself to stay quiet, because when I hear good stuff, when I hear these truths that really trickle down your spine, then I always say, oh, wow, and people were commenting in the podcast, they're like, Gregory, shut up, man.
Shut up.
This is so annoying. And I'm like,
yeah.
But wow, there's so much truth in there.
Well, I'm glad I remember.
Wow.
That's one that's stuck.
Oh, thank God you remembered it. This is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And combine it with the idea that move as if you are in pain. It's just like when you take it from where Pavel took it from the gun analogy. I recently learned this when I started shooting some guns. And this is where I heard it for the first time. Treat the gun like it's loaded. Yeah. This is where Pavel got this from. Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, why? Well, because you never know.
Yeah.
So it's like you double check it, triple check it, right? So understanding that there might be trouble lurking down the road, act like there is trouble lurking down the road. So be careful. Oi, Vitrand. Hello.
And that's sort of one of the ways that I organize my own programming. Is not necessarily around push, pull, blah, blah, blah. It's around stress tolerances.
I love this.
So if I know that I've accumulated stress through frontal plane loading, then the following day I'm not going to frontal plane load. Whereas if I've accumulated stress tolerances through shear forces because I've been doing bent over rows, suitcase carries, Turkish get-ups, bent presses, then the following day I'm going to bilaterally frontal plane load. because I don't have stress, I don't have tolerance in my shear forces anymore. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I undulate my training quite, because I'm a massive advocate for, like you, the hybrid style of training, but I'm a huge fan of lifting heavy. I still love the feeling of it.
And we see that, yeah.
Pushing my strength, pushing my physique, pushing my, all of that stuff.
And let me just put, I think what you just said there can be put into the following parameters. Understanding that you, Glenn, as a trainer, as a physical culturist, trains the body to a level or to a degree where a beginner or even an advanced trainee probably wouldn't even go. So for most people, can I swing every day? Well, probably yes, because you're not swinging a 64 kg for 2 minutes. So you're probably fine, or every other day, totally fine. Because the way you explained it might be for some people like, wow, that sounds incredibly complex. For you and me, it's easy to understand because we know that stuff. And when I talked to Dr. Yeses, when we were talking about my biomechanics, I was like, this is so complicated. He says, yes, if you don't have the knowledge. Yeah. I have the knowledge. For me, it's easy. I'm like, okay, I get where you're coming from. Yeah. So I love the way you go about it. There's a lot of thought that goes behind your training. And at the same time, I think you love lifting heavy. You put your body through a rigorous routine where a structured program is a must if you don't want to get hurt along the way and maybe even push the numbers. So for most people, this might be something that's down the line. Because what we are huge fans of is just say, listen, I think a clean and press, if you have this exercise down pat, one of the greatest exercises you can do. If you clean and press every other day, I think you're totally fine. You're good. But of course, if you up the numbers and you reach a level of intensity, programming has to become a little bit more smart, right?
Of course, yeah.
Most definitely. And final question before we end the podcast, man. And this was very entertaining and very informative. I always love this, man. I get to talk to people who are so bright-minded. I learn a lot. Our listeners will learn a lot. This is awesome. So my final question: do you see a unique benefit in swinging monster kettlebells? Anything that's beyond 48? And it doesn't matter if it's swinging, cleaning, or whatever have you. Do you see a benefit? Because, and let me phrase this question properly, in some cases I'm like, listen, anything that goes beyond, well, I deadlift with double 44s and double 48s as well, but anything that goes beyond a certain metric, I'm like, hey, let's just use a barbell. But do you see a particular benefit in swinging heavy or just using heavy monster bells in general?
I haven't retested my strength with a barbell in a while. But last time I retested my deadlift, it had gone up even though I hadn't been deadlifting in a year. And my deadlift had increased from a previous 1RM of around 220 to a new 1RM of around 235, which is pretty significant.
Wow.
That's kilos.
Yeah.
Kilograms. So at a body weight of 80 kilos, I was pulling 235.
Nice.
I was always hunting for 3 times body weight. I hadn't quite got there. But for me, monster kettlebells, as you put it, the experience is important, both sort of physiologically of knowing what that sort of nervous system recruitment feels like. It helps hone the movement that you're using, because the movement that you're using to swing a 20 might actually have a bunch of discrepancies of timing or of tension or of recruitment that you'll clean up by swinging heavier kettlebells. Because like I said before, you can't get away with any nonsense when you're swinging heavy. Your breathing has to be timed correctly. Your bracing has to be timed correctly. The pulse nature of a swing, rather than it being all one tempo, but that sort of float phase, pulse in, pulse out, has to be very refined. So as I've said to many of my clients, I endeavor to be the best coach possible, especially with kettlebells, especially with everything. But I endeavor to be the best coach possible, but I still think the coach that outworks me is a kettlebell. I still think you can't fake anything with a kettlebell that carries a certain level of resistance for you specifically, you're gonna relearn a lot about your energy systems, about creating force. That's what I love about the swing in particular, because I loved the deadlift. A swing is a deadlift. It just has ballistic force.
Ballistic, that's it.
Right, exactly. The projection of force is vertical, not horizontal. That's what I think a lot of people get wrong with a swing as well. They drive their hips through, not into extension vertically, but it's a vertical drive. So I think that the carryover to meaningful athletics or application of using your body in the real world, whether it's jumping forward, running up a hill, like the application of the skills you gain from swinging heavy is very clear in the real world, in my opinion.
And I try to press Dr. Michael Yesses on this, who's a biomechanist who understands. I love that if you haven't watched this conversation, you have to.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that one. I haven't seen it.
It was recently, and okay. It's incredibly complex. He goes against the grain of so much that we think and that we think we know. He's one of the old guards who says that's at least what I got away from this conversation is that you have to have the understanding of the exercise, how the body moves. That's the coach. But you have to have also the understanding of the joint function and the way the joint moves, what muscles are involved in the movement, not in the exercise. And that is the biomechanist. So you have to analyze the body, and then you have to be able to prescribe a proper exercise. And then I said, well, in that case, you have to have the coach and the biomechanist together. And he said, well, that's what they did in the Soviet Union back in the day when Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky was around. That's why they were so good at it. And I'm like, yeah, but that stuff is incredibly tedious and complicated. He says, yeah, like I said, he says, that's why you don't understand it. That's why it's complicated. I'm like, yeah, but isn't sometimes something too complicated? You can't make it easy. It's too complicated. And then he said, well, then you dismiss it because you don't have the knowledge. But that's what 99% of coaches do. He says, NFL, top teams, everybody does this.
That's what I think is so interesting about the world we live in now, is that we're seeing very intelligent, educated people that can understand complex topics, and you can see how they're differentiated from a genius that can take that same complex topic and make it understandable to the layperson like myself.
Or at least make it understandable to the athlete that he's working with.
Right.
Because I don't think that's what I struggle with. I don't think you can make a biomechanical analysis easy for somebody who doesn't have the background in that field. It's like, that's why this guy has a PhD. You can make this easy.
Well, that's why your cues are so, as a coach, your cues are so important, and they're only as valuable as the ears they land on, right? Your cues are only as valuable as the ears they land on. And if you can't get your point across to your athlete with a very succinct cue, then you need to work on your verbal skills and your understanding of that skills.
Yeah,
so you distill it further.
Most definitely, you have to understand how to communicate, how to coach in the cue. But then I like what Dr. Yesses said as well. He said, there's one lesson that I've learned from my teacher back in the day. He said, if you have a room of 200 people and you go through to only one, your job's done.
Okay.
I'm like,
yeah.
Whoa. Because prior to this statement, we talked about that many coaches and trainers are just people in regular. I think you can extend this to people in general.
Yeah.
Don't understand because they don't want to understand. We don't have a common body of knowledge that we draw from. Everybody wants just to prove their point. Barbells are great. Kettlebells are great. Body weight is great. What are you talking about? Right. Instead of coming together, creating a common body of knowledge that everybody can draw from. Where maybe you and I realize, oh, okay, the kettlebell doesn't do this. For example, we were talking about power production. And I was like, yeah, but the swing and the kettlebell is perfect for power production, blah, 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 blah. And so we said, well, there's one problem. There's momentum. I was like, okay, well, if you want to improve power, you want to reduce momentum. The kettlebell has momentum.
Dead swing.
Yeah, but still, there's momentum when you swing.
There is the momentum. Right? That's yeah.
Right.
So a little workaround, but yeah.
Yeah, there's no workaround. But then as we progress in the conversation, he says there's two camps or two types of strength. general strength and specific strength. So then he says, I will put the kettlebell into the general strength camp. But then as we progressed through the situation, he was rethinking, and he was like, well, I probably do some applications in the specific strength area. And then I love what he said, but don't ask me why. Or don't ask me where.
This is where you and I started talking, because it was the pistol squat that really got us going, right?
Yeah. Oh, even earlier. I mean, I checked out your stuff earlier, but the pistol squat thing with the and some people really got mad at me for this. It's crazy.
But it's fascinating, right? Because it's a general strength tool, the kettlebell.
Yeah.
The kettlebell effect for specificity is a real thing.
And that's the question. He says that's the question. I said, well, for example, you have a runner who gets faster through swings. He says, well, you might have just tapped into the potential that the runner needed to get better, but you don't know.
Right, yeah.
It's probable, but there's a lot of ifs. You got to watch this conversation.
We're complex organisms, and the psychology, the anatomy.
But he said, if you understand the biomechanics, you know exactly how to train it. And I was like, well, and does this lead to these kind of strange exercises? He says, well, at least to my understanding, to a certain degree, yes. Where probably you and me would be like, that's a strange, or I would be like, that's a strange exercise. Okay. But then he put this in parameters again and said, you have to listen to bright-minded people who offer a different opinion. But then he said, don't listen to stupid people with no credit. Right? So you have to make this distinction. You got to watch this conversation, man.
I'm definitely going to. Look, I tried to get into deeper conversations with Nadi Aguilar about his system and about the application.
Funny that you bring him up. I just had him in my mind as well.
I know. I really genuinely tried to have full conversations with him. But instead he just blocked me because that's
what it is. It's you know, about the pistol squat. Now that you mentioned functional patterns, with the pistol squat, it was a similar situation with somebody, where somebody really got mad because I think he has a athletics background, and then I was like, hey, at least for me, that was the case. Never did no pistol squats in my life. Well, that's probably because you were lacking strength. And then I told him the numbers: 170 kg deadlift, 140 kg squat. I don't think it was a strength problem. I love what you say. Maybe the
lack of unilateral training.
Lack of unilateral. Oh, I get this. And that's what the kettlebell taught my body. So that's the reason why I was able to pull off a pistol squat. And I'm not saying that this is the way to do it. And I love how you progressed it. We had a completely different conversation. You said, hey, I see your point, but I got something to add. So this is the way I see it. And I agreed with you. And then I had to also mention that this is anecdotal experience. This was my experience. But then I have to mention again, and sometimes I do this, I open up the box of my secrets. Sometimes I post stuff intentionally that gets some people a little bit unnerved because that gets some views and some comments, right?
Engagement and I do that.
That's the game, and we have to play it. And people even get mad at this. People get mad at, why are you putting up a title that says you're going to lose weight with this workout? We all know that nutrition is important. Bro, nobody cares about that stuff. People just click on it because they see the title.
That's exactly. My post today was exactly that, and my message underneath was, "This is tongue-in-cheek." Right, okay.
And even if you wouldn't mention it, you did mention it, and maybe somebody still got it the wrong way.
Yeah. So, someone will be in my DMs having a go at me.
Most definitely. And see, that's the reason why I'm escaping the matrix of it depends, because if I would stick to this thinking of it depends, my YouTube channel would have 100 subscribers max.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I call it legit bait. I heard this great definition. Somebody says clickbait is when somebody clicks on your video or your content, and then he gets misled. It's like, oh, I was looking for this, but I was looking for Y, but I got X. That's crap. That's clickbait. But then he went on to say, there's also legit bait. I'm hyper.
I love this expression.
I use a hyperbolic term, a hyperbolic thumbnail, and you're like, "Ooh, I gotta watch it," and I still deliver.
That's
legit bait.
Love that. Legit bait.
Legit bait. That's when that's so fascinating. I talk to Angie about this all the time. You have to mix and match the world of content creation that is ripe with hyperbolic content and thumbnails that make you want to click, or content that has to become viral because, hey, you got to make some bread, so you want to become an expert, you want to put your name out in the world. Well, there's millions of people who try it, so you got to make a name for yourself somehow. We're not, and that's what people hold against me as well. They say, well, Pavel didn't do it. Well, of course he did it. He did it with John Duquesne.
Yeah, of course.
All intense, hardcore marketing. Back in the day, that's how they did it.
Blew in the face of everything that came before.
Yeah, they had to do it. They were all up in your face. Yeah. So I have to mix and match the content creation side of things with the coach side of things, where the coach truly understands it is it depends game, but the content creator says, bro, if we play this game, nobody's gonna watch it.
I love that. Oh, brilliant. Masterclass.
That's what you just learn that stuff when you want to get ahead in the online space. And I just recently I talked to Beto Torero, who's also an awesome kettlebell juggler. Yeah. And we were talking about coaching, and he said, man, I got to think about creating my YouTube in English, right? Because I think now he's doing it in Spanish. Mm-hmm. I said, do it, man, but be aware you have a friendly but highly competitive competitor right here.
Yeah.
Everybody's vying for the throne, the kettlebell throne.
Hey, I got a YouTube channel too. Are we competitors, or are we just in the same space helping each other grow? Because you have some content, I've got some different content. Chances are somebody who plays with kettlebells will be interested in both, right?
Most definitely, but at the end of the day, we're still competitors to a certain extent. But there can be friendly competition. For example, I just recently saw Dan John upgrading his thumbnail game. I'm like, that looks way better. Oh man, I gotta upgrade my stuff too.
He had great content if you knew him and were willing to listen, but there was nothing to draw you in.
No, nothing. And I love the fact that he understands this now. Maybe he has a team who's working with him.
Yeah.
And I love it. I'm like, ooh. And I recently texted him, or I wrote in the comment. I'm like, hey, coach, your thumbnail game is increasing. So that forces
Instagram
me.
Or YouTube? Where's he doing it?
YouTube.
YouTube.
And I saw, and the numbers went up. I was like, this is a clickable thumbnail. And look at it. Boom, the numbers went up. Yeah. And I told him I love it. And now I got to upgrade my stuff too. I love it. That's the competitive nature of it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But if you talk to people who are insecure, mentioning functional patterns to a certain extent, who is probably is, I don't know him personally, then this competitive nature gets combative.
Yeah. It's just frustrating because I feel like there'd be a decent conversation to be had there.
Most definitely.
But it's such a little cult that I got attacked by everyone in the comment section.
Yeah.
For what, like, I cannot tell you how honestly and like with love I was trying to have an open conversation, because I'm not a combative person. I'm not an asshole. I don't mean to be. And like, I was trying to understand how he got to where he is, and to what extent I could incorporate some of the theory with the things that I knew to be true. But I couldn't even get to that point because there was so much fire and fury coming back at me that I couldn't get to. Anyway, whatever.
And some people just get mad if you just ask a question. Yeah, and did you? Maybe you noticed this. Sometimes maybe on your channel or on mine as well, people ask a question and then they follow up by saying, I really mean it. Yeah. Or I'm really interested. So we have come to we're now in today's age, we are at a point where if you ask a simple question, you always have to follow up with, hey, I really mean it. I really want to know. Yeah. Honestly asking. Why are we even putting that disclaimer out there? Just ask the question and I answer it.
Yeah.
Right?
No, exactly.
It is what it is, man. Hey, Glenn.
It's been a pleasure, Gregory.
Man, it was awesome. I think it took us, at least 1.5 hours at least? That's why I'm always saying 90 minutes at least.
At least. Keep
awesome.
Going. We got other topics. There's plenty other topics we could talk about.
Yeah, and we gotta switch this to a different podcast, man. It was really, really informative and interesting, and
absolute pleasure meeting you.
Me too. A lot of stuff that I can take away from this conversation. The EMS thing, the back pain situation, this gentleman, which I pray to God that he gets better with your help. He's on his best way, I'm sure. And
12 months time,
fascinating.
he'll be boxing. 12 months time, that's our goal. He'll be boxing.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, Glenn, let's end it on that high note.
Yeah.
And hey, man, when we have to do it again down the line sometime. And yeah, once everything's settled, I'll send you the video. It's gonna be up on the YouTube podcast channel.
Cool.
And it's going to be up on Spotify as well, and all the podcast editions. So once it's up, I'm going to send you the link, okay?
Thanks a lot, man.
Man.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time, man.
Awesome. Same here. So here's the next step that you have to do. Like the video, consider subscribing, share it with a friend who's also interested in kettlebells, and then go watch this playlist where you have all the powerful conversations that I have had with the greatest minds in the kettlebell world. If you enjoyed this podcast, you're gonna enjoy these other ones as well. So go click on it and watch it right now.